if there were no rules, knowing what you know as a new state representative or a council member or a staffer at the city or a commissioner. I talked with all these people in the neighborhood, activists in the neighborhood where this was going to be built. And I sat down with them and I asked every single one of them, what would you build? And they all described these places. Well, it would be equitable. There'd be housing for the homeless. There would be, they would have solar panels. It would be sustainable. It would be a place for community. It would have its own food production. The water would be clean. It would harvest its own water, and there wouldn't be any waste. You'd have a zero waste neighborhood. And they all came up with these things. And I'm like, but nobody is asking for this. If I come up with this, because that's what we want to do, would you help us do this? And universally, everyone said, yes.
This is the Regenerative Real Estate Podcast. Revitalizing the world together. Welcome to the Regenerative Real Estate Podcast. This is your host, Neil Collins. It is a show that is supported by our work at Latitude Realty. In it, we explore our natural and built environments and how they can be used as a force for good. The show sets out to inspire impactful ideas, meaningful change, human wellness, and ecological restoration through interviews and easy-to-digest conversations. Our guests range from industry leaders to iconoclasts, from both well-known figures to everyday people leading extraordinary lives. This is a show for people looking for education and inspiration on how real estate can be done differently. Hey everybody, welcome back to another show of the Regenerative Real Estate Podcast. I've got Matthew Grocoff here with me in his beautiful living room. Matthew, I am really excited to have you on. I'm going to open it up with a little bit of your backstory in your bio. And this is what really attracted me. And I think people are going to understand why I wanted to reach out. But you're a founder of Thrive Collaborative, a development, design, building, and consulting firm dedicated to life-enhancing communities and cities needed for the 22nd century. And you hit that and you're just like, okay, we need to talk. So welcome to the show. Thanks so much for having me. Or having you.
Well, no,
having your time.
Around. Thank you for having me. And yeah, and the way when you read that, I was like, wow, that sounds really cool. I want to work there.
Exactly. Yeah, that's amazing. So you're doing
living room, and just as far as backstory goes, it's worth mentioning that this house was one of the first Living Building Challenge certified homes for net zero energy, and it was the first in a historic district. The first retrofit, I believe, I said, and we'll talk about this later on, but that at the time, it was really cool that everyone was writing about it around the world, really, and the Atlantic called it sustainable perfection, and I said that was kind of, bullshit, for lack of a better word, because there's no such thing as a sustainable building. And then, and then I heard Bill Reed say that a few weeks ago on your show, and it was true. And I said that if we are still the oldest building in America to have achieved net zero 5 years from now, then we will have failed in the mission, because the mission is to have other people doing this. Well, I don't think it was a failure in the mission. We're still the oldest home in America to have achieved this, and there's no excuse for that, other than the swarm isn't really working properly. But it's pretty neat. Right now,
it's a beautiful home. For everybody on audio, you can't see the beautiful millwork that I'm looking at in the background, and I just think that's so extraordinary. But hey, Matthew, I got to tell you, it's always a pleasure whenever you get to interview somebody with their own Wikipedia page. But it is scant on some history before you started on your home that you're in now, before the Living Community Challenge that we're talking about. And I saw that you had a law degree, so I'm kind of curious, where did you grow up, and how did you evolve into doing what you're doing now with Thrive Collaborative?
Look, the reality is, if I had a really cool backstory, I'd be a Marvel superhero, not a regenerative developer, right? It's Yeah, it's funny because there was not some subtle awakening all of a sudden that happened for me that got me to where I am today, but it really was kind of this collective thing. We talk about workshops where they tell you to go to think about, imagine a favorite part of your childhood or favorite space, and almost universally, anywhere you do that around the world, people will talk about something in their childhood that was in nature. And so those experiences, I think, inform all of us, whether you grow up in an urban environment with the lack of green space, or if you grow up like I did in the suburbs and watching things around you kind of slowly disappear. That all becomes part of your psyche. And so it was a slow evolution rather than this lightning bolt or a spider bite in the case of some other superheroes. So I grew up in a place called Dunwoody, Georgia. It was an unincorporated part of DeKalb County outside of Atlanta. And we lived in a new suburb, and across the street was a farm run by one guy. He was like in his 80s, I think, at the time, or at least he seemed like it when I was a little kid. Old Man Brooke, right? He's
Man, Brooke.
straight out of Scooby Doo. And he lived in a house with, electricity, no telephone, and he farmed, and he had cattle, and you could smell if a cow died out in the pasture across the street. That was there. And then just around the corner, we had a house with the Georgian columns, with the out front. They had this big green sprawling lawn, and every once in a while, it's just one of the most vivid memories of my childhood is when you drive by and you'd see this lone suburban house across the street from this farm, and the pigs would escape, and they'd go and they'd graze in the front lawn with these Georgian columns. And and now that's a neighborhood called Brook Farm. So we, as the people talk about, we create these developments and we name them after the places we destroy. Um, so that was the childhood, and there was a what we called a creek, across the street from us, and it was really just a drainage ditch that was created by the creation of the neighborhood. But there were crawdads and all kinds of things that we would explore in there. And then there was a real creek right around the corner, and we'd go on creek hikes and go back into the woods. But everything around there now is uh, completely developed. And so, but I had this idea at a really young age that things weren't going in the right direction. We would go up and visit my grandmother in New York, and we would drive through New Jersey, and I just remember vividly, like the putrid smell of the chemical plants with the burning, the flaring that they would do, and it was literally like it would burn your nose, like you couldn't not breathe in it. Like you would breathe it, and you would smell it, and you would feel it physically in your nostrils. And then you would look around and you'd see homes there. And I remember as a little kid, 6 years old, just thinking, how do those people live in those houses? And right near there was where they filmed the little thing with the Indian, crying, seeing the trash on the streets. And those things just have powerful impact on me as a little kid. And then as I got older, growing up in Georgia and seeing these things, the forests around me that I would go on these creek hikes through slowly become destroyed. And then them wanting to widen the road that was, we used to walk up to the grocery store along. And then we found a couple of years ago, found in a box this a set of note cards that I honestly don't even remember where it was from or where I read this, but it was clearly some sort of public hearing that as an 11-year-old I went to protest the fact that they were building this road. And and for some reason I understood the concept of induced demand at age 11, right? Where it was like, and I told them, if you expand this road, you're not going to reduce traffic. You're just going to convince more people to drive on those same roads. And you're going to build more things, and you're going to destroy more of the forests that I play in. And building more roads is not going to solve the problem. And here was an 11-year-old talking to whoever it was at the time that was in charge of this. And then just kind of leap forward. By the time I got to college and really started reading, Paul Hawken's book, The Ecology of Commerce, and I decided to go to law school. And considered becoming an architect, didn't follow that path, ended up getting a psychology undergraduate degree, and considered going to advertising for a while. And when I went to law school, one of the questions they asked on the essay was, why do you want to be a lawyer, or something along those lines? And I basically just told them, I have no freaking idea. But here's the things I care about. I care about the welfare of children. I care about the welfare of the environment. And I see the things that are happening. And I talked about the things in my childhood growing up and watching the destruction of the earth, and talking about, chemically and habitat and all these other things. And at the time, this was the early stages of hearings in Capitol Hill on climate crisis. And I said, I think law will be a really good lever to work towards the things that I love and the things that I care about. And that's why I want to go to law school, whether or not I become a lawyer. So I did that. In first semester, I knew almost certainly that I was not going to be a lawyer, but I ended up getting a law degree, and it was a valuable education. It was very active in a lot of environmental things, but quickly realized that the things that were being thrown in my direction were really what do you call them? Doorstops, or just to give you an example, there were two major things that I was offered a job in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, to work for an attorney who was suing one of the major paper companies on the Pascagoula River for putting dioxins into the river and polluting and destroying all these farmlands. So he gathered up basically a class action lawsuit of everyone who owned property, all the farmers along the river that had their crops destroyed by this paper plant. And I realized that's great. These people should be punished, but do I really want to spend my time punishing these people who are causing this severe damage and just barely breaking the threshold of what is legal and what is not? Or do I want to really be asking the question, which you can see where we're getting to, what does good look like? And then the other option was going to work for the EPA. Same thing, punishing people through the regulatory process and giving them the bare minimum. And if you did anything less, you were breaking the law. Well, that's really silly way to go about making real change, and to not asking what's possible, but asking what is necessary, right? What do we need to be doing? And that's where that's the space we should be working in.
Mm-hmm. So I know that you didn't end up going too far into that law career. You went into advertising. What was that turn of events like?
So actually, no. While I was working at the State Bar of Georgia, I took a role as the sheep in Charlotte's Web for a children's theater. That was the big turning point. And that's when I was bitten by the spider. So there was. So I ended up getting into entertainment and advertising, and became a producer, and really started looking for mechanisms of trying to find the biggest lever that I could. And one of the things was media, and how do we leverage media for these things? And this was in the early 2000s. And it was a tough game. There wasn't any, even, in air quotes, green products on the market at the time. You had your handful of, safe coat paint and things like that were selling to hospitals because they didn't have toxic fumes that were poisoning the patients. But beyond that, there was really very little for a homeowner to do, run into Home Depot and buy FSC wood, or Green Guard, or anything like that wasn't even available. Green Building Council really was in its infancy at the time. So the opportunity to do those things, even through 2005, by the time I left California, were slim to none. There were celebrities who were really active in environmental things. There was Ed Begley doing some neat things to his home and buying an electric car, and Simpsons episodes mocking him for being in this tiny little bubble that he would drive around in that got 40, 50 mile range. Where do you go from that? One of the concepts was a show called Celebrity Greenhouses. And so we sat down with, this really big producer, and we were pitching ideas to coming up with stuff to pitch to HDTV. And we said, all right, let's brainstorm a list of all the celebrities that we could go to their homes and see all the cool green things they're doing. And we got to about 5. celebrities, and and then when you looked at Google satellite map at the and you realize it's like, yeah, they still live in Beverly Hills and they've got 3 condenser units on the rooftop of their house. It's basically a commercial building that they live in. Like, this is not a show. This is not what we want to do. Leaping a little bit forward, I woke up one morning, rolled out of bed, went to the farmer's market in Santa Monica. It was daylight savings, and I saw my friend Samantha, and she was with this beautiful girl named Kelly, who had overslept because she was missed her yoga class because she didn't set her clocks back for daylight savings. And this girl was adorable. Ended up marrying her because she was just that darn smart and creative and beautiful. And we ended up living in Santa Monica for a while, and she's going to grad school. Decided she was going to all these places up and down the West Coast, and this one place called University of Michigan. So that brings us to Ann Arbor for 16 months. And we had no intention of staying here. But when we got here, we ended up really falling in love with the town, and really kind of experiencing Ann Arbor and Michigan in a way that was nothing like I imagined it as a little kid, as this industrial wasteland. It was really this stunningly beautiful state, really one of the most beautiful places in America is northern Michigan. And then realizing that this was one of the more resilient places on earth for climate crisis. And if we were going to raise children, we wanted to be able to live in a town that kind of already was starting to understand climate crisis. Geographically was located in a place that was going to be lesser levels of mitigation than some other places. And we ended up buying a house with lead paint, with asbestos siding, with plywood front porch, with gas lawnmower in the shed, a Mueller Climatrol gas furnace in the basement that had been running since 1950, zero insulation in the entire house except for a layer of newspaper up in the attic that was dated 1901. With a column for the ladies by Lucy Whitmore, and there's a Whitmore Lake just north of here. So it was a pretty extraordinary place, and but what it had was really incredible bones and a south-facing roof that needed replacing. And this was fall of 2006, and it was in November, so it was July of 2006 actually when we came to look at the house. And in November of 2006, so we bought the house in October, November, and we had this goal that we were going to make this house net zero energy. That I really believed that look at this thing. We can harvest our own water here and treat it to potable standards. We could harvest all the own energy that we needed on this site. This was perfect. Let's do this. And then in November, I went to Greenbuild. I don't remember where it was at the time, and met this guy, Jason McLennan. You may have heard of him. And he was announcing this little thing called the Living Building Challenge, literally 2 weeks before we closed and moved into the house. So it was like, cool, I'm going to do that.
Shouldn't be that hard.
Because I didn't know it wasn't possible. And I didn't ask the question, is this possible? Honestly, it never crossed my mind. And my wife never questioned it, right? Is this possible? She never asked the question. Neither did I. I said, what's necessary? What should we do? Let's go do that. And not having a background as an architect or an engineer, not really being involved in green building other than doing, every year of the Green Building Conference since it started, and having knowledge of that. And then we started a little, doing, I was producing political television commercials, traveling all over the place, renovating the house. And we started to document a little bit of what we were doing with the house. And we decided that if we can't pitch a show to HDTV, there's this new thing called YouTube that we could actually create our own television show. And I taught a class at University of Michigan about how people could go in and reinvent and redistribute media and entertainment in the way very much like nature does, right? Like let's decentralize this. And little did I know that it would be re-centralized and it would be much harder to do. But there was no iPhone at the time. There was no Zoom. There was no digital cameras other than the giant DV cameras with the tape in them. and then we started this thing called Greenovation TV. It was a do-it-yourself home improvement show. So I was, early day of YouTube with some of these videos, and started writing, doing a lot of stuff for a number of different websites on green renovation, and uh, and again, because we didn't know it was not possible, we decided, all right, how much solar can we get on that roof? 8 kW. All right, how do we make that happen? There's this incentive, this incentive, this incentive. Here's what it's going to be. Crazy incentives at the time, actually. It made it cheaper actually then than it is now because of all the just ridiculous incentives that they were throwing at it. I still to this day don't understand why everyone didn't take the utility company up on that. But they had 1,000 slots. Within 11 months, they were all gone, and we got 8.1 kW up on the roof. We insulated the house as much as we could. We did the things we needed to do. We put in geothermal, and we did what we could, and we electrified the house. We knew that to decarbonize, first thing we got to do is get rid of the gas. So we worked towards that. Got an induction cooktop from Whirlpool, and there it was. We unplugged the gas, and which was a lovely day. The guy was driving out of the driveway after he just turned the meter off, and I chased the DT truck down the road going, whoa, 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 whoa. And I'm knocking on his window, and I'm like, the meter's still there. He said, oh, yeah, I turned it off. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. The meter is still there. I want you to cap it, disconnect it, take it away. I don't even want gas on the property. Well, we'll keep it there in case you want to turn it on again. I said, I will never turn this on again. And I will hope to encourage other people to do the same, and they will never turn theirs on again either. And then a year later, we were about a year and a half later, I think we were certified net zero energy with through pedal recognition through the Living Building Challenge.
That's amazing.
And again, not through any kind of sacrifice or anything else, just through electrifying and powering it with solar. It was that simple. And to this, so and yeah, so
I have a feeling that it might not have been that simple. With experience working on old homes, especially 1901, I'm like, you installed geothermal, you did, insulation of walls that I'm sure were lath and plaster that were crumbling.
But renovation isn't simple, right? Renovation is it's ridiculously difficult. It's a pain in the ass. No matter what you do, all renovations are complicated. But at the same time, we were renovating our house. We had friends renovating their homes here on the Old West Side, this historic neighborhood here in Ann Arbor. And they made choices. We drove an old Honda at the time, a little stick shift that got 40 miles to the gallon. And other people were buying, other friends were putting in granite countertops and buying SUVs. And they were spending the same kind of money we were, but the choices we did with this kind of 5-year plan was, all right, we'll take that. We'll put the solar on first, and then we'll do the kitchen. 5 years left of the solar on. We have our kitchen done. Solar's paid off, and we have no energy bills and a new kitchen. And then we can go buy an electric car. They had energy bills and a used SUV.
I know that you ended up getting in on water too, didn't you, on that house, or was it a different project?
Yeah, because we're stupid that way. Yeah, I grew up in Atlanta, so good trouble was something that I learned from John Lewis, and that was part of my background too. I was very involved in politics and everything else, and got the great privilege to work with John Lewis. So good trouble was a big part of my life. And so water, obviously, I was in a meeting with the former mayor of Seattle at a Living Future conference years ago, a group of people. And I remember him saying that as they started exploring how do they encourage Living Building Challenge, and he said, once they got into it, they realized that sustainability was illegal. And there was nothing in code. And we knew from the beginning that there was nothing in code that could let you get to net positive water. But we knew, talking with all water engineers and everything else, all the technology that we ever will need exists today. And by today, I mean, 7 years ago, at the time we were talking about it. And so I sat down with a professor at the university, Dr. Steve Skurlos, and we just had this great, just really energetic conversation about, how should it be? What would you do? And it's like, well, it'd be a completely decentralized system that will be networked and connected, interconnected, the same way a forested ecosystem, the same way energy microgrids operate. That's the way the water network would be. And you would be harvesting the water as close to where it's used, and you would be treating wastewater and removing the nutrients, and you'd be taking that water and putting it back in, and you'd be restoring the ecological water cycle. That's what we would do. And it's like, well, how would you do that? You boom, 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 boom. We start going through the engineering ways of doing that. It's like, there it is. Right? You can get most of that stuff at Home Depot, right? Like, why aren't we doing this? Okay, that's the problem. It's the centralization of the decision-making process that humans have developed over centuries and then evolved into code and everything else. And so we're working with these energy codes that were meant to socialize the water system, the centralized water system, right? We've got water problems. We polluted our wells. Let's centralize it. Let's use modern treatment. In the 1920s, we start telling everybody they can't use wells. They've got to be part of the system. A population grows, you add a pipe. Population grows some more, you add another pipe. And then all of a sudden, you've got what people are calling a complex system of water, but really is a overly complicated Rube Goldberg linear, and what engineers call fracture critical, meaning that if any point along that chain of events breaks, the system goes down. So linear systems are rarely, if ever, found in nature, not long term anyway. They're all networked, they're all mutually beneficial, and they evolve and they iterate into complex adaptive systems. So what we have now is a system of water where where it's completely centralized and may have made sense for smaller populations. But now you've got cities like New York with millions of people to the cities like Ann Arbor with 100,000 that have the same kind of system. And the schematic of that is we take water from the Huron River. The Huron River is polluted. To this day, it's got PFAS and now dioxins about to reach the river from a plume that's slowly moving over in that direction. And all kinds of other environmental toxins that are coming in from the roadways and the storm drains and everything else. We pull that water up. We use a huge amount of energy. We pipe it up the hill to a street called Summit, top of the hill, right? And we use more energy and chemicals to treat that water. We put it to potable standards, then we pipe it back down through thousands of miles of pipes and redistribute that through the city, and thousands of miles of pipes with the average age of like 80 plus years each.
There's a bunch of lead in them.
This is the end of the life cycle. So of these systems or these component parts even. And then we take all of that water, it's all potable, it's all treated with chlorines and other chemicals, and we pee in it, we poop in it, we put our tampons in it, we flush our cigarettes down there, we do our pharmaceuticals, we put that all into there, and then we send it down a second pipe called the sewage pipe. And we took these very small amount of nutrients, and Mark Brewer from Engineering 2020, who did the Bullitt Center and a bunch of other living building systems. I think it was him who told me that if you were to poop into a shoebox for a year, and I don't recommend this to anyone, but if you poop into a shoebox for a year and you stick it over in the corner and you let it dehydrate, you won't fill it up by the end of the year. Like that's how much volume you're talking about in human waste. It's very little. So we take this small amount, ounces, including the water that's in this waste product, ounces of feces or urine. The urine's not toxic, by the way, right? It's got plenty of nutrients in it. And frankly, neither are the feces for the most part. But then you put it into 5 gallons of water that our house had when we were first flushing. And you're now releasing on average 300 gallons of potable drinking water that is now toxic and creating sulfides and all kinds of other what we call sewer gases, that if you were to go into the sewers without a mask, you would die very, very quickly from the gases that are in there. So this is really this toxic sludge that we've created with this sewage. And then we send that to a treatment plant, and we again more energy, more money. We treat that in another ridiculous way, more chemicals. Um, we have no nutrients from that, and then we take that water and we put it back into the Huron River down at the other side. In between, we have lead pipes for the drinking water. We have leaking sewage. I mean, 3 days ago, there were hundreds of gallons, which was a small one, into the Arboretum, in the Nichols Arboretum here in Ann Arbor, overflowed into an area that they had roped off. We've had tens of thousands of gallons go into our nature areas from broken sewer pipes. On a really nice neighborhood here, someone drove over a sewer pipe into some construction, flooded the neighborhood with tens of thousands of gallons of raw sewage. And this is a great community with a great system, right? With one of the better systems, better graded systems. This is true all across America and frankly, Europe and other industrialized nations. Same system is being repeated. And then we have a tertiary pipe, right? So that's just the water we use inside the building. Then we have this tertiary pipe called stormwater, this apocalyptic thing that we've got where we're taking what's rainwater, something that should be something really healthy, and we're totally, severing this fractal relationship of this ecological water cycle, and we're pouring it everything that hits our property, from grasses to asphalt driveways to asphalt roof shingles that have lead in them, by the way, one of the things we discovered in our water thing. And all of that goes in, collects all the lead and everything else, and goes into the storm drains. So what Living Building Challenge does, and what we were able to do with Blue Lab, is rethink that system and put together the component parts in a very simple way that mimicked natural systems, that used the metaphor of the flower, used the metaphor of the trees in the forest, where they don't go across the street for a drink. They get their water from other organisms and from the sky, and they're sharing that, and they're communicating with each other in extraordinary ways through chemical processes, and they favor their young, their own relatives, which is an extraordinary thing. So we're able to harvest the water on the roof. We replaced the asphalt shingled roof with a metal roof, and again, simple system. Goes through a pre-filter system, goes into a tank, comes into a filter system, gets filtered down to 0.1 microns, and then into carbon filtration, UV filter, and then to the taps. But it's not classified as legally potable water, even though it is scientifically potable. So we can use that to flush our toilets, to wash our laundry, to irrigate the lawn. That's it. Don't tell anybody, but we do drink that water too. They can't stop us from actually drinking that. But code does require us to put a sign on all these taps that say, do not drink. This is reclaimed water, or it's gray water. It's not potable water. And so you have to have that on the toilet. So I really want someone to propose a law for all potable water fed toilets that says, this toilet contains potable water. Feel free to drink. But instead, if we've got one that says, don't drink the toilet water, it's not potable. And it's like, and we're required to put that up.
Hey everybody, this is Neil. We are going to get back to this great conversation in just 1 second. But I think it's fair to say that right now we are facing some pretty unprecedented challenges in the 21st century. I mean, you name it, environmentally, socially, economically, we've got some big problems that we need to overcome. And that's why, for me personally, and the people that work with us at Latitude, we want to dedicate our time and our energy so that we are not only working to put food on the table and a roof over our heads, but also make the world a better place. And so if you are at all interested in combining your sustainability values with a very powerful financial model of real estate, then I highly encourage you to check out what we are doing at Latitude. We are creating something truly special with a tribe of change agents that for now is working across North America, and hopefully one day in the future, with you coming on board, we can be working across the globe. So please check us out. You can go to www.chooselatitude.com, or you can find us on social media at latitude.realty on Instagram, and we are also on Facebook. Okay, let's get back into it. I need to jump in here because what's incredible is you went back to, hey, this is a simple system. And we've created this very linear process that's quite complex because we think that it's efficient. But
Yeah.
really, I mean, we say in the regenerative world that, hey, we're not going for efficiency, we're going for resiliency. But I still have to come back around to nature is going to be the most efficient system out there because we don't have outflows.
Well, I would use the word optimized rather than efficient.
Mm.
Efficiency is not, just one of the biomimetic examples that I think for Viridian that we're doing. I know we're going to get there, but somebody who was a bit older and was doing solar housing in the 70s came up to me at one of my lectures and said, how come all of the houses aren't facing south? Why don't you have these perfect, 180-degree south rooftops? And I said, which way do the leaves face on a Baroque tree, which should be abundant in Ann Arbor, but it's we're in Oak Savannah, and the original tree here was the Baroque tree, right? They're doing pretty well. Which direction do they photosynthesize? All of them. Is that efficient? Hell no. But it's optimized. So it takes just as much energy for the tree to produce a leaf on the north side, on the bottom that's shaded by the other leaves, as it does to produce a leaf on the south side. But that's not what its purpose is. Its purpose is to optimize for solar gain. And as long as it can get enough energy and it can have enough stomata to open to get the carbon dioxide that it needs and to close to hold on to water when it needs it, then it's cool. It's okay. Then it passes on its offspring and it iterates and it gets better in the next generation. But they're not all facing south. And things adapt with different strategies. The heliotrope, the sunflower, tracks the sun. That's more efficient, but it's really not efficiency that it's going for. It's optimization, and that's what it's doing.
That's beautiful. That's actually pushed me over into a realm. I was kind of stuck on that. These are actually very efficient systems, but no, I love that word optimized. Thank you for that. I hope that people can realize that, one, you've got an amazing background for a developer of like, rarely do I see the developers that are really pushing the envelope come straight out of the trades, come out of architecture school and just go into the built environment and like really embracing sustainable and regenerative systems. There is a bit of naivete of, hey, let's do the living building challenge. Can't be that hard. But
Right.
The way that you break it down, not only are you talking about the theoretical and how ludicrous the modern system is and what we've done through the progress of modernity, but really just showing that we can do this on an old house, we can do it on any house. And I'm curious, so let's go from the house that you're in into Thrive Collaborative. When did you start putting out this company and this concept of let's form a business around it?
Yeah. I'd say that, wow, I would never have dreamed of doing anything like that, but that'd be a lie. I don't think there's any. You dream of everything, right? It's like, and if you're trying to solve problems that you can solve in your own lifetime, you're not dreaming big enough. You're not. It goes back to what we were talking earlier about the difference that I make between simplicity and complexity, or complication and complexity. That complex adaptive systems are actually really simple. And what that means is that they iterate from the bottom up, from outward. And I think it's Janine Benyus who talks about the simple rules for local interaction, and that's how biology works, right? And they have to be adjacent to each other. There has to be some physical connection or adjacent connection to them in order for them to work together, whether it's a chemical process, a biological process, or a physical process with crystals forming or anything like that. Everything from the cellular structure of your the capillaries of your lungs to stars in the universe. It's like they all go by these same simple rules, right? It has to be this adjacent simple rules, right? And then it works its way outward, not the other way around. So with Viridian at County Farm, it really came from just constantly butting up against this difference between trying to convince everyone all over the place to do these things, be sustainable, again in air quotes, and knowing that there was no sustainable thing, that we really had to reinvent systems entirely. And so really just kind of came back and started shifting my focus back to Ann Arbor itself and saying we need to just stop consulting and teaching people what to do and just do it. So we started looking for mechanisms of not, okay, we're going to custom build a house for you. Oh, by the way, solar panels are X amount extra. Oh, let's ditch the solar panels. And then what's the point? Why are we building this building? We're just building another house. That's not what we're trying to do. So, but because of the work that I was doing, because of the lectures that I was doing around the world, and gained a certain level of knowledge about the systemic thinking and the products basically that were out there to achieve these things, and being a student of biomimicry and all these other things, I was able to get the reputation where people thought I knew what I was doing. So I went over to this a place called Argus Farm Stop. It's this little 365-day-a-year farm stock grocery store. I think it's 363 days. I think they're closed twice a year. And they source all of their food from local farmers. 200 farmers in 2,500 square feet deliver products every single day into this little tiny grocery store, and it's an extraordinary system. So I ran into Conan Smith, who was a commissioner, the Washtenaw County Board of Commissioners, and he said, we've got this old juvenile detention property, youth prison, over on Platte Road, and that'd be really cool if you put in a response to a request for proposal for a net zero energy neighborhood. And I was like, all right, that's cool. Send me the RFP. And I read the RFP and I got back to him. I said, you're not asking for anything that we would want to deliver. Why would we compete with all these other developers when you're not asking for any of the things that we would be offering? And so it led to this whole process of talking with other people, saying, listen, and just not me telling them what we wanted to do, but just asking them, if there were no rules, knowing what you know as a new state representative or a council member or a staffer at the city or a commissioner. I talked with all these people in the neighborhood, activists in the neighborhood where this was going to be built. And I sat down with them and I asked every single one of them, what would you build? And they all described these places. Well, it would be equitable. There'd be housing for the homeless. There would be they would have solar panels. It would be sustainable. It would be a place for community. It would have its own food production. The water would be clean. It would harvest its own water, and there wouldn't be any waste. You'd have a zero waste neighborhood. And they all came up with these things, and I'm like, but nobody's asking for this. If I come up with this, because that's what we want to do, would you help us do this? And universally, everyone said yes. And we got kind of this buy-in before we even agreed to propose anything like this. So I partnered with a friend of mine who had been partnering on a bunch of other projects before, David Eifred from Green Life Building. And then he brought in his wife's cousin, who's part of this big family of developers called the Jonahs, Joey Jonah, with Jonah Luxury Homes and Jonah Construction. And they're large family, all in the food and construction business. And that kind of gave us the clout, the power to do this. And they're conventional developers by any stretch of the imagination, from hotels to big paved parking lots to office buildings to luxury housing, you name it. They are the conventional developer, and have done very well doing it. And slowly did some lead projects and things like that. But Joey really kind of knew and saw what Dave and I were doing, that that's the direction that things need to go. And so we formed a new company. We moved Thrive out of the consulting part, and created a new LLC for Thrive, and created the Thrive Collaborative, the three of us, in order for the purpose of creating this proposal. And we competed against many conventional developers who did very gridded developments with big retention ponds and lots of parking, all the required by code. And we came in with something completely different, and we kind of looked around the country, and we brought in Biohabitats, and Pete Munoz, and who'd done a number of Living Building Challenge projects, and Shannon Gibb Randall from Insight Design, who had worked on some other Living Building Challenge projects with me here in Ann Arbor, and MCI Engineering here in town, conventional engineers, but individuals who kind of got our mission and really understood what we were doing. And I know I'm forgetting. And Union Studio Architects out of Rhode Island, who had done a net zero neighborhood, and this was kind of their white whale, right? They didn't have clients asking them like, let's do the whole thing. Let's not just build luxury housing and throw some solar panels up on it just for the benefit of the homeowners. Let's make something that's grid beneficial, community beneficial, and to all living things, not just to the people that are living there. And all of a sudden, this was really inspiring to everyone. And so we. The first get together we had a day-long charrette, and we came up with a design that was very close to what our final designs are, that we were approved last year. And I put up a picture of the old city of Venice up on a screen, and a leaf, and I matched them up together and showed the team like how similar these are. Why does a leaf evolve with the same structure in its venal system as the streets and the water systems of Venice did? Because they were both organic bottom-up processes. So we are not going to stand above a conference room table with a big sheet of paper and design downward. We are going to design with all of the benefits that humans have. We have the benefits now of Google satellite maps, and that provides an incredible, wonderful macro view where we can see things that no other organisms in the history of life on Earth have been able to do. We can do that now. We can see into the future, imagine into the future, and we can look at it from the macro view. But that's all we've been doing for the past 100 years. It's the first time we could float up a balloon and get pictures of this cityscape, we started realizing the way we can manipulate the landscape from above. And I said, but we also have Google Street View. Let's design for humans from Google Street View with the knowledge that we have from Google satellite maps. And that's where the process began.
What I don't think that we've done so far is introduce what Viridian is.
Yeah.
And what is this community? And this is why I think it's incredible that, one, there's not that many living community challenges out there. And whenever you read about what the challenge is, you instantly realize this is the direction that we have to go in. And so the fact that from the developers to the engineers to the contractors and the architects saying, hey, this is the direction that we need to go in, I completely understand, because you just see it and you're like, okay, yeah, to go from a living building to that's great. We need more of those, but how do we scale it? That's really the work of the next century, and why I think it resonates back with just the intro on your website, that we're designing cities and communities for the 22nd century, and something that is so cool.
Yeah. So, the Living Building Challenge and the Living Community Challenge are not the end goal. They're not there for their own sake. They even talk about that, but primarily it's a philosophy and an advocacy tool. right? That's what it does. And Bill Reed talked about this a little bit on your show, that while living building challenges is a wonderful tool, and it's a necessary tool. It is not the end game, but what it does is a tool that plays us towards the end game and gives us a framework for that chessboard, right? Um, and so that's really what it does for us with Viridian at County Farm. We still have to lay this on top of the fictional world that's created by code and the legal fictions and everything else. We still have to get this through this middle path, this center of the conventional development system that is extremely and deeply and dangerously flawed, right? We have to we still have to obey code. We still have to get um, approval from the planning commissions and everything else, from the neighbors. You still have to get it financed. You still have to sell the homes, price them, and frame it in a way that they will be able to get a mortgage to pay for it. So houses are driven, the square footage is driven by by mortgage lenders and appraisers. We literally had to add rooms into the conditioned spaces of the attics so that we wouldn't have to expand the footprints, and they were going to be conditioned attics anyway. But now that it's usable square footage, now we can call it a 2,400 square foot house, and now we can price it at the price that it needs to be in order to make it a living building challenge home. The bankers, the mortgage brokers, and the appraisers all drove that process, said, no, you can't do a 1,500 square foot house. It's like, because you won't be able to get a comp for it, and they're going to have to come to you with cash. So we have to, everything we do has to be in that framework. Yes, you want solar panels on the roof. There's a regulatory framework for that. We have to be mindful of that process. So we have to push all of this and all of this change in the same process. So where we started from was sitting down with our partners at Avalon Housing, who are doing the affordable housing parcel of Viridian at County Farm. And the very first meeting, when I was really supposed to be kind of begging them and saying, hey, listen, we would really like deeply affordable housing here. It's something we could do as a developer to get 80% of area median income, but that wouldn't be right. What we really want to do is really deeply affordable housing, and you do it best. Will you please partner with us? But instead, what I did was I said, hey, listen, this is kind of the vision. There's this living community challenge idea here. It should be net zero energy. Everyone in this neighborhood, including the affordable housing, should have solar panels. They should be resilient. They should have their lights on when everyone else has their power off. It should be grid beneficial. It should be equitable and affordable to everyone in the neighborhood. But I can't do that. You can't have solar panels, and here's why. You're multifamily housing. We have master metering rules. You are one owner with 50 units. You can do it in your common areas, but you can't do it for your rental units. So it's not even possible. But what you can do is make it all electric. And before we start this conversation, and I'm going to make the case that you should be part of this partnership, before we start the conversation, I would need you to commit to being all electric. Because that at minimum, even if we don't achieve all these other goals, and I'm going to keep trying to get us there throughout this project, even though I will tell you now it's not possible. Less than a 5% chance of ever getting a microgrid into this neighborhood that would make it feasible for you to have the same kind of systems that the wealthy homeowners can afford in their individual houses. But if you are all electric, we can get us there. And we've knocked down that barrier. If everything we do, the cool stuff we do is going to be playing here on the edges, and we are going to try to hit every single goal that we need to do to what we know and have agreed in our very first charrette is what good looks like. What should it be? What is necessary, right? We didn't ask the question, hey, what's possible? Let's design it. Because then we would have a conventional development. What we asked was, what is absolutely necessary? What is good? What does that look like to you? And when we took all those sticky notes and combined that together, it's Living Community Challenge. That's the framework that we can use. So by them saying that, I quietly was off on the side, trying to meet with folks at the utility company, experts in microgrids around the country, experts in virtual power plants, and saying, um, tell me the engineering challenges here. Well, there's not really any. What's the challenges then? It's the human ones. It's the regulatory process. It's the financing. It's the all the other challenges. It's the but from an engineering perspective, we already kind of know what to do. We've got the software. We've got the everything you need for a microgrid like this. But in a neighborhood where you've got 150 units of housing and it's affordable housing on one side, one legally owned parcel, and another legally owned parcel that's owned by that's developed by one person, but then it's bought by 100 others. There's no mechanism for that. What do you do? So it's near zero probability of this happening. So, but again, I'm not dealing on the macro level with a big utility company called, DTE Energy. I'm dealing with human beings, right? So as I sit down with those human beings on that adjacent level and start having conversations and seeing them not really progressing, I finally, a year and a half ago, was able to sit down with this guy, Marco Brezzano, who was, I believe, he was head of their distribution at the time. And this was great because before the meeting, I know this is the guy we're creating problems for. Because now that I'm an all electric neighborhood, forget about everything else we want to do. But if I'm all electric neighborhood, your average pole age is 57 years old out here. You're going to need a new substation. You're going to need to upgrade these poles just by electrification alone. Oh, and by the way, we're going to put a car charger in every parking space. Oh, and by the way, we're going to put solar on all of the market rate homes and all the community spaces for the affordable housing. So now I've got energy flowing both ways. I've got a huge load crunch that is unmanageable. But I can do it because every individual house is owned by one person with a meter, and I can now, solar's affordable enough, far cheaper than it was 5 years ago when we started this process. It's under $2 a watt now. I can put that on the roof and the mortgage brokers don't care anymore. Now it's a luxury amenity that I can sell to a homeowner. And hell, some of them I can even include a $10,000 battery pack and throw that in there. And now they've got their own little nano grid. Beautiful. But I sat down with Marco and said, I can stop now and sell these houses at a premium. And I've got a bunch of people who can afford it with their lights on and their own little nano grid and no energy bills, and an affordable housing complex with the lights off during a power outage. And there's nothing beneficial to the grid. I haven't solved the climate problem because these electrons are not going to really be beneficial to the grid. They're not going to be used when they need to. They're not even used by the homeowner during the times when the sun is shining. So what if we give control of these electrons to the utility company and let's work together? And he was like, I love this. This is the way we need to go. And after months and months of work and him saying, we're all in, we're all in, we're all in. Here we are a year later. There's a whole new engineering team with this one, Yuja Zhao, who's just fantastic. These people coming in and they kind of get where the utility company needs to go. And we're piloting a microgrid at Viridian. We don't know what that's going to look like in the end. We're still toying around with all kinds of things from ownership, placement, billing, regulatory things, condo docs, all these crazy, insane, complicated things. But if we do it right, then just like everything else, you create a complex adaptive system that starts with what in biology called the invariable terminal unit, right? Where does that energy end? Where that energy is used, every light bulb on the planet is virtually the same. In the same way that the capillaries in your lungs are identical to that of the shrew, which is the smallest mammal, same size. They're exactly the same. And the blue whale, same. But you can, walk through the aorta of the heart of a blue whale, like, even though the parts and the terminal unit is all the same. So if we can do that and then scale it out, then we've got this wonderfully complex system, adaptive system, that as the technology gets better, as things evolve, and just like in nature, improves over time and is resilient. Because if there's a failure at any point in that system, the failure is graceful, not catastrophic in the way it is in a fractional critical system.
Wow, this is incredible. What really stands out to me is there's different types of property ownership as well. And I've looked at the design. You've got like co-housing in pocket neighborhoods and affordable housing and market rate and townhomes and
Well, it's actually, so that was one of the things that we didn't bite off more than we could chew. So we're keeping with a very conventional model that's recognizable to people about home ownership. So there's really only two kinds of housing. There's home ownership and the affordable housing, which is owned by a nonprofit, and then they provide services, supportive housing, and their rental units, and they pay for the rent and they pay for the utilities for those tenants. Whereas the diversity of the housing types and the varying price points comes from the way we design what we put into the neighborhood. And that goes everything from what people are confusing for co-housing because it looks very similar, um, uh, called the nest flats. And the nest flats was an idea that kind of evolved from a conversation that I had with Ross Chapin. And if you haven't had Ross on the show, you should. He's
Ron
um,
Ross is a good friend mentor of ours. Yeah,
so
he's
uh,
amazing.
So Ross had this idea of a micro unit house on, I believe it was Orca Island or one of the islands in the San Juans, that could be adapted for intergenerational living or workforce housing or all kinds of things where you so basically it's a structure that articulates in the neighborhood at the scale of a house, of a large house, right? So this is a 5,000 square foot building with 11 nest units in them. Each unit is a self-contained 400 square foot apartment. It's got its own induction cooktops and small oven, and washer and dryer, everything you would need. So your kitchenette, your all these things. Beautiful apartment, super super smartly designed. We really kind of use the philosophy of designing it like a boat, where every single square inch of space is used and optimized, right? Um, and that's your apartment. And you can see there's examples of that around Ann Arbor, right, where you get these small studio apartments, and that's it. That's what you get. And the benefit is you get to live downtown, and you walk outside, and that's your life. My favorite place I ever lived was in Santa Monica, and it was 300 square feet, 3 blocks off. But my backyard was the ocean, was the Pacific Ocean. It was 3 blocks away. And so in that building, you also have a common space that is that there people are being confused as a shared kitchen. It's not that they're all sharing that and that you have your own bedroom. It's that you have your own unit, your own apartment, you buy it, you own it. But then you also have access to the same luxury amenities inside your own larger house that the village homes, the single family homes that we have in the neighborhood right next door. So those are 2,400 square foot houses that have these really lovely chef's kitchens, right? Well, now you get that same chef's kitchen put into this unit that 11 people have access to. So not necessarily shared in the sense of a shared kitchen, but they all have access to that space, and then can use it for Thanksgivings, for parties, for other things. There's also little working pods that are soundproofed where you can go in and make a phone call. You can sit down and invite a group of friends to watch the Oscars or the Super Bowl or binge watch Game of Thrones. I don't know what you would do, but you have your big screen TV, your living room, your kitchen, large capacity washer and dryer, which you wouldn't have in your unit, but you'd be able to do your day-to-day laundry in your own apartment. But then you'd have access to these larger capacity, very efficient heat pump clothes dryers and everything else inside the building. And then the entire building run with geothermal energy and extremely efficient with solar panels on the roof. And everyone with their own, with wraparound porches and things too. So you get the same, again, if you spend $800,000 on a single family home or $150,000 on your own little apartment, the amenities are the same. You still have access to the kitchen that you might use in your house 5 times a year for big events, Thanksgiving and such, but you're underutilizing that equipment 90% of the time. And your porch, you have that too. You have all these things, and you're part of a community that has townhomes trillium flats, which are larger apartment units, 3 stories, single family homes, nest units, affordable housing, where 30 of those units will be people who have experienced homelessness. 10 of those 50 units will be from Ozone House, which is at-risk youth. So you really, this just kind of everyone, I see you. It's not an economically segregated community. And we talk about economic segregation in, well, we keep all the poor people over here and the wealthy people over here. It's a deeper problem than that. We segregate every level of income in America. Like you go to a Pulte neighborhood and every house in the neighborhood is $250,000 over here. And they've got their $400,000 neighborhood over here, and they've got their $800,000 neighborhood over here. And there's very few buildings of condos or neighborhoods that have multiple price points in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And then everyone's looking for the comp. What's the comp for the neighborhood? And what that forces is that everything in the neighborhood becomes monocropped, right? It's like growing freaking commodity corn, because we're all trying to hit the same price point, because we might not get, it's like, I don't know if you're going to be able to sell a studio apartment in a neighborhood full of $300,000 homes. It's like, well, come on, which is it? And so it is harder to do this way. The exciting thing about getting into what you and I call regenerative neighborhoods, and we really don't market it too much as regenerative neighborhood, we market it as a freaking beautiful neighborhood. And I said that once in an interview, and I think I used the actual F word, and the headline was, "It's going to be freaking beautiful." That's my favorite headline of all. It's like, yes, that's the point. That's the point. The solar panels is not the point. That's like saying the point of a saguaro cactus is its fabulous water harvesting and storage system. It's like, no, that's not the purpose of a saguaro cactus. So the exciting thing about these regenerative neighborhoods is that I do believe that when you design them with that whole philosophy, including the biomimicry and the biophilia and the deep biophilia, people want to live there, right? There's an excitement about this project that other developers are frankly jealous of and calling me to say, can I learn more about that? And I've had many Zoom calls with developers in the area coming to me and saying, what are you doing? That seems pretty neat. And you got through the planning process a whole lot faster than we did, because it seems to be what the city of Ann Arbor wants to be doing. And because of that, I sent out this survey, and I thought we'd get 20 responses and we'd get an idea of what people were looking for in the homes stuff. So I really put together the survey. It takes about 10 or 15 minutes to fill out this thing. And these were for people who want to purchase a home in the neighborhood. That if you want to purchase a home in the neighborhood, tell us what you're looking for. Tell us what you're living now. Your needs for electric vehicles, all this kind of stuff, biking, walking. And the next day we had 109 responses. And we now have, I looked yesterday, we have 158 people on this waiting list to purchase homes. We have 110 units for sale. That's just the people who have committed to that. There's others. We have, over 100 local investors. For as little as $500, we're able to invest in the project, up to $1 million for local investors. All putting money into the project and really rethinking. So you get this kind of, again, I keep going back to this notion of adjacency, but you, again, from Janine Benyus, you take care of and you protect what you love, right? The things you love are the things you experience that are near you, that are adjacent to you. And the ones you can hug are generally the ones you love the most, right? That's the closest, the most adjacent that you can get. So yeah, so Viridian is just like a big hug.
I got to ask you, are you going to be moving to Viridian?
So we live right downtown. In Ann Arbor, but with this lovely tree canopy backyard and a net zero home that we've raised our children in so far. I really want a Viridian house. I really do. I want it on this property. And as much as I love the historic nature of our house, and we won all kinds of historic preservation awards, and we actually got historic preservation tax credits, which made the net zero energy that much more difficult in hindsight. Like, we were limited by what we could do. Again, I didn't question it. It's just like, okay, how much how much insulation can I get into my walls while maintaining the historic plaster? Okay, R13, cool. That's what we're doing. Would help if we air sealed a little bit. Okay, let's do that. You know what? Let's do a cathedralized attic, because that way we eliminate the 140-degree swings in temperature that you get inside these attic spaces. That's going to be a huge benefit. And again, just common sense things that my ignorance allowed me to pay attention to. And so get rid of all the old appliances, replace them with electric ones. Well, let's get the most efficient of those appliances. Let's put in geothermal. Let's get as much insulation in the wall as we can. Let's air seal. Let's put a cathedralized roof in. And then let's put on solar panels. And there you go. So in a way, because it was iterative, because it was adjacent, because we were living in it, I don't think we could have done this if we just kind of built it for somebody else. I was paying attention, and over 3-4 years saying, okay, let's wait to get this appliance because this is coming out. Heat pump water heater. Let's wait till we can get that. Get the heat pump water heater, and then let's do this. And all of a sudden, you've got the most efficient appliances available, and you're able to afford them because you meted them out slowly or put them into the original mortgage when you bought the house, with the construction loan, the renovation loan that we took out. So by iterating, it worked. It wasn't some master plan. It was a vision for what was necessary. That's it.
This is such a fabulous conversation because it reminds me of a conversation that I had with Steve Nygren out of Serenbe in
grew up in Atlanta, so I know Serenbe very well.
And Steve,
our team has been there, by the way.
So there's a ton of parallels, but Steve ended up developing those neighborhoods because he wanted to live there. And so the adjacency that you're talking about, you see it a lot there. Steve also ran into a ton of financing problems that as bankers, it was an unproven concept. Yes. And he had to sell Class A Peach Street real estate in order to finance his vision for his project. You alluded to a bit of crowdfunding. Is that the main mechanism that you went through?
No. So what we did was, again, from the beginning, we had to say, all right, if this is a conventional development, how would we do it? Right? And that's our minimum viable product. Now, what things are we not willing to compromise on? It has to be all electric, and it has to have enough solar to get us to net zero energy, right? That's the minimum viable product, and that's the conventional path. So if we do nothing else, we have private homes with all these things on it, and we have affordable housing that's developed by Avalon, and they've got what they do. And nothing can get in the way of those things, because if they do, it doesn't get built, right? So we had to stick with that. So which meant we had to be able to go through the conventional financing system in order to make it happen. It's harder. And doing that, we knew that we would have to let go at some point. Something was going to break, and they're going to say, no, you can't have those things on the side. You can do your pro forma without that, get rid of it through conventional investors or conventional developers. But we told every investor that we spoke with that this is an amazing real estate deal. You are inside of a 130-acre park called County Farm Park. You are across the street from Whole Foods and Lululemon and Sur La Table, right? In a neighborhood across the street in one direction that has $1 million plus homes. Inside of a college town, bikeable distance to the University of Michigan and all these research hospitals. This is a damn good real estate deal. We were able to leverage that and say, but if that is why you were interested in doing this, and that is the only reason, this deal is not for you. And the terms didn't change, right? The terms are the same, but we're saying to them, this deal is not for you. We want you to be invested in this because you want to help this neighborhood get developed. And that's why this was, Joey calls this the perfect storm, but I think it's the wrong metaphor. It's all the stars align. I don't know what the good metaphor is, where it's like you've got all these great assets that you can leverage to do a regenerative neighborhood. And I hesitate to call it a regenerative neighborhood because it's not, but it is doing things that are heading us in that direction, improving what is already possible today. And so with the financing mechanism, we got those like-minded investors, and then we said, you know what, let's localize this as much as possible. And we had talked to some folks who had done some crowdfunding very successfully, and we said, let's bring them in. And that was really hard for us to do. It's expensive. It's a black hole of time to do it, but we were committed to doing it anyway because we didn't want just people signing petitions and saying they support the project and this is exactly what Ann Arbor needs. We wanted another layer of how do we reinvent the finance system? What are other mechanisms that developers could go to? And so we're trying to experiment with as many things as possible. And we also spoke with a family fund who is dedicated to putting $250 million a year into what they call sustainable real estate. They ended up doing much more institutional type deals than what we could deliver. Wanted a much bigger return over a longer period. Ours are very short term, so the deal didn't work for them. But what we were able to do was create these relationships with investors that are deeply interested in financing the next generation of development and really pushing the envelope with that. And I think, frankly, they learned from the process of working with us too. Even though the deal ended up not working out, it was beneficial to both parties to be involved in that, saying, okay, here's how you guys do this with this institutional investing. Here's how we do this, where we're threading the needle of having to go to a bank to finance things and develop in the same way that Pulte Homes or Toll Brothers would do, and get people to buy houses with conventional mortgages. What's wrong? What do we need to fix? And so every failure along the way is a graceful failure that we learn from that we can fix the next time. And we've got a great relationship with them, and we're probably going to be doing future projects with this family fund. So we can still go to banks for the debt part of the financing. And it's looking better and better that we can do that. The weird thing is, the perverse incentive is, that's the cheapest kind of financing for us right now, is just to go to a bank, and we pre-sell a certain percentage of these homes. It's not going to be really hard for us to get. But if we don't pre-sell more homes than usual, it's difficult. How do you tell a bank who gives you a construction loan for site financing that says, okay, you've got $800,000 in your stormwater management system, so we'll give you $300 to dig the $300,000 to, or $100,000 to dig the pond, and we'll give you another $50,000 for the first set of pipes, and in the stage 2, we'll give you the next set. It's like, oh, you didn't look at Biohabitat's plans, did you? We're not doing pipes. There are pipes in the same way that an oak tree has a pipe. But the pipes are broken up into different parts, and there's bioswales, and there's engineered systems, and there's tree roots, and there's all kinds of things that are all part of our water network. And we've done the math, and we've done the science, and we've engineered a system in cooperation with the natural systems that are part of and we've stitched together that fractal nature of the land as it was before we got there, as much as we possibly could in this human built environment. And it has to be built holistically in the same way that it was designed holistically. If you only build a part of it, it doesn't work. It has to be built as the system it was intended to be. Banks don't understand that and don't give a damn about that. So that's why we have to rethink the financing system. So, and simultaneously be able to use it and go through the conventional system. So this is hard. No doubt about it.
You still have hair. Listening to the challenges that you come across, and this is why they do call it a living community challenge. It's extraordinary, and I love that. I mean, the players that you've got on that project, Keith Bowers from Biohabitats, just the work that they do there is incredible, and I love that you brought in Russ Chapin. And for time's sake here, Matthew, we've got you're going to have 159 people on that waiting list. Just go ahead and whatever kind of security deposit I need to put down on a unit, And just sign us up. That sounds incredible.
Yeah, we keep thinking that we're going to have to answer all kinds of challenging questions from these prospective home buyers, and what they end up coming back to us. And we keep having these stakeholder meetings where we invite them to ask questions. And the biggest question, they get angry with us: how are you going to prevent a bidding war? And I'm like, whoa, that's the problem. That's a great problem to have.
It is a good because it hits people with where their values are, and I think that's the most extraordinary thing, is like really diving into this conversation is, yeah, can you spin it as a regenerative community? Sure, but what is the benefits of these? And
Yeah,
people
yeah,
are starved for this.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, we didn't even talk about the cars and the food and the bikes and the pathways and the equitable nature of that. How do you do a condo doc? We could do a whole show on that. Like,
We
you
got to
know,
come back for round two. We'll do.
yeah,
How about that? How about you make some progress into the community, and let's do a round two. And I might even have to just fly out there and bring a camera crew, and
we should really do that because there's a lot more to talk about, and there's a lot going on. Like Jason McLennan says, they don't call it a challenge for nothing. And like everybody's grandfather told him, it's kind of like, getting old ain't for sissies, right? It's like doing this ain't for sissies. He's like, you really got to be committed to doing it and be uncompromising. And that's what we're doing. Yesterday we had a first day with our intern, and she said, the only question I really have is, why aren't you guys more stressed?
That's a
And,
good question. That's amazing. That's funny that she picked up on that right away.
but it's we're doing what we love, and it's very purpose driven work, and that's why. And everyone on the team, uh, including the engineers at the utility company, are excited by getting to do something new and creative, and that they know is iterative. It's bigger than themselves. They are playing a small part in something that is going to be pieced together in something that is much bigger than the sum of its parts.
That is beautiful, and that is a great place to put just a chapter end with coming attractions for hopefully another just amazing conversation. Matthew, thank you for your time. This is
Gosh,
absolutely inspiring.
thanks for having me, and I look forward to doing this. Next time we'll do it over beers.
Okay, everybody, that is a wrap. This is another just great episode that I'm so glad that you're able to tune in. And thank you for being interested in regenerative real estate. What we are trying to do is help people and planet thrive together by using the built environment as a catalyst. And so I've got a couple big asks for you. Number one is, can you please go to wherever you're listening to this podcast, leave us a rating and review. Those actually go so far. And since this is such a passion project for us, we really want to be able to attract the best thought leaders from around the world. Second is that if you really like the content that we're putting out, you can find us on our own Medium publication called Regenerative Real Estate. We also have a very active community on Facebook, which is called Regenerative Real Estate and Design, which you can request to be a part of, and we would love to have you. And third, this goes to what we do every single day, helping buyers and sellers demystify sustainability by working with people that want to either buy a property and are trying to figure out the financing of, how do I actually live out my values? How do I put that water catchment system on there? Or how do I go finance a solar panel PV array? Or maybe I want to live closer to nature. And what are the properties that are out there that I can do that? And so we represent buyers like that. We also happen to represent sellers that maybe they've already invested in sustainable features. Maybe they have a living building or a LEED certified project. We want to help tell that story. So much of what goes on in the real estate industry is transactional thinking at best, and it translates down into agents just really don't know anything about sustainability. And for us, we think that the value is there, and we want to help highlight really the intrinsic value of it, not just the bedrooms and the baths and the square feet of what typical marketing goes on. So if you know of anybody that wants to buy or sell these kinds of properties that we're talking about, please reach out to us at Latitude. and be sure to subscribe for another great episode coming up next week.